Chosen one, listen carefully. This is not an accident. You did not find this message by chance, and you are not late, forgotten, or overlooked, no matter how many times it has felt that way. Right now, as you're listening, something deep in your spirit already knows this is for you. Not for a crowd, not for everyone. For you. You may not fully understand why yet, but God's timing is already unfolding in ways your natural eyes haven't caught up to. Let me say this gently, but clearly. God delayed your blessing, not because you were unready, but because He trusted you. Trusted you to carry something that would have crushed others. Trusted you with weight, responsibility, and permanence. Trusted you with what comes next. And if that truth stirs something inside you, I want you to stay with me, because the season you thought was denying you was actually preparing you. You see, many people want what God gives, but very few can hold it without losing themselves. Many can receive a breakthrough, but not everyone can protect it. Not everyone can steward it. Not everyone can remain humble when the door finally opens. That's why the waiting was long. That's why the silence was heavy. That's why the prayers felt unanswered. Not because God forgot you, but because He was shaping you. And if you're honest, you know this already. You've lived long enough to see people rush into things they weren't ready for, relationships that destroyed them, success that hollowed them out, opportunities that cost them their peace, their family, their faith. But God would not allow that to be your story. So, He slowed time for you. He closed doors you begged Him to open. He withheld answers you pleaded for. And every delay was an act of protection. Chosen one, I need you to hear this part slowly. What God saves, He secures. And what He secures cannot be taken, rushed, or undone. That is why your path has looked different. That is why comparison never worked for you. That is why watching others pass you by hurt so deeply. Because you were never meant to arrive the same way they did. Your life has not been about speed. It has been about depth, and depth takes time. There are blessings that arrive early, and there are blessings that are saved for last, not because they are smaller, but because they are heavier. You are listening to this now because heaven knows you can finally carry what is coming without it destroying you. And if that resonates, even a little pause for a moment and comment, "Amen," not for me, but as a quiet agreement between you and God. Now, let's go deeper. You may feel tired, not physically tired, but soul tired. The kind of weariness that comes from being strong for too long, from holding faith when it would have been easier to let go, from believing when nothing around you seemed to confirm it. God sees that. He sees every moment you chose integrity over ease, every time you kept your heart soft instead of bitter. Every time you stayed faithful when no one was watching. That's why the blessing was delayed, not denied. Because timing is not about readiness alone. It's about trust. And God trusted you enough to wait. Let that settle. You weren't overlooked. You were being prepared. Some people receive things quickly because they are temporary. What is coming to you is not temporary. It will settle. It will remain. It will define the next chapter of your life. And that kind of blessing does not come through striving. It comes through alignment. Right now, something has already shifted inside you. You may not have noticed it yet, but you're not the same person you were years ago. The impatience has softened. The ego has quieted. The desperation has been replaced by discernment. That is not accidental. That is preparation reaching its final stage. You are no longer chasing doors. You are no longer forcing outcomes. You are no longer trying to prove anything. And that is how you know the timing is near. Because when God is about to release what He saved for last, He removes the need to strive. You begin to feel peace before the evidence appears. You begin to feel calm where anxiety once lived. You begin to trust without needing constant reassurance. That is heaven's signal. Chosen one. Let me say this with clarity and compassion. God does not delay blessings to punish His people. He delays them to preserve them. And He preserved yours because it was too important to waste. You have been in a long season of becoming wiser, becoming steadier, becoming someone who would not confuse the gift with the giver. That's why your story feels like it's been unfolding slowly. That's why nothing ever felt rushed or shallow. That's why even the pain shaped you instead of destroying you. You weren't being stalled. You were being trusted. And now, the waiting is changing. Not because you forced it, not because you demanded it, but because the preparation has reached its end. The door that opens next will not require convincing. It will not require proving. It will not require exhaustion. It will feel right. And when it does, you will finally understand why it had to be saved for last. If this message is speaking to your spirit, comment, "Men below." Let it be your quiet declaration that you receive this season not with fear, but with faith. Stay with me. We are only at the beginning. Now let's go a little deeper slowly, gently, because what you're about to understand is not meant to rush your heart. It's meant to steady it. By now, you've probably realized something about your life. The waiting wasn't just long, it was specific. Certain doors didn't open no matter how qualified you were. Certain people walked away even when you did everything right. Certain opportunities came close enough to stir hope, and then slipped through your fingers. That kind of delay doesn't happen by accident, because if this were only about time, it would have passed already. If this were only about effort, you would have earned it by now. But this season has been about formation. God was not just preparing what you would receive. He was preparing who you would be when you received it. And that is where many people misunderstand divine timing. You see, some blessings are safe in anyone's hands, but others require a heart that has been tested by disappointment, tested by silence, tested by moments where faith had to stand alone without applause, without proof, without reassurance. That's the kind of testing you've walked through. And maybe you never called it that. Maybe you just called it life, or bad luck, or it is what it is. But heaven has always known what it was doing. There were things God needed to remove from you, not because they were evil, but because they would not survive where He was taking you. Certain expectations, certain attachments, certain ways of measuring success. If God had released the blessing earlier, it would have been filtered through old wounds, old fears, old definitions. And instead of blessing you, it would have burdened you. So, He waited, not because He enjoyed your waiting, but because He valued your future peace more than your temporary comfort. And here's something important, something many people never realize until much later. God's silence is not absence, it's supervision. When it felt like nothing was happening, something was happening quietly, deeply, invisibly. Your discernment was sharpening. Your dependence on approval was loosening. Your need to be seen was softening. You were becoming someone who could walk into fulfillment without losing humility, and that matters more than you know. Because when God saves the best for last, He also saves you from becoming unrecognizable to yourself. Look back for a moment, not with regret, but with clarity. There were moments you wanted things badly, moments you prayed with intensity, moments you thought, if this doesn't happen now, I don't know how I'll keep believing. And yet, here you are, still believing, still standing, still listening. That alone tells you something. It tells you the delay did not destroy your faith. It deepened it. Most people don't realize how rare that is. Many lose their tenderness when waiting gets hard. They become sharp, guarded, cynical. They start expecting disappointment as a defense mechanism. But you didn't go that way? Yes. You felt pain. Yes. You felt tired. Yes. You questioned, but you didn't close your heart. And God noticed. That's why what is coming will not feel chaotic or unstable. It will feel anchored because it is being released into a life that has learned how to remain steady. You may have wondered why God didn't just give you something small along the way, something to keep you encouraged. But He knew that crumbs would only distract you from the fullness. He wasn't teasing you. He was protecting your appetite so you wouldn't settle, so you wouldn't attach yourself to things that look good but couldn't last, so you wouldn't confuse temporary relief with lasting alignment. There is a difference, and now you're mature enough to recognize it. That's why this season feels quieter than you expected. You thought the breakthrough would come with noise, with drama, with fireworks, with sudden announcements. But instead, it's coming with peace. A peace that doesn't need validation. A peace that doesn't need to explain itself. A peace that says, I don't need to rush. What's mine will arrive. That peace is not passive. It is evidence that something has settled inside you. And here is where many people miss what God is doing next. The shift does not start outside of you. It starts within. Before doors open, alignment happens. Before recognition comes, clarity settles. Before the blessing manifests, striving falls away. That is the stage you are in now. You're not waiting the same way you used to. You're not praying out of panic anymore. You're listening more than asking. That tells heaven everything it needs to know. Because God does not release what is permanent into a life that is still frantic. He releases it into a life that can hold still long enough to recognize it. And you are there now. You may not feel ready in the way you imagined years ago, but readiness doesn't look like excitement anymore. It looks like steadiness. It looks like discernment. It looks like peace with or without applause. That is why heaven is confident with you. You didn't lose your faith during the delay. You didn't lose your compassion. You didn't lose your sense of reverence. You were being prepared for something that would stay. So if you've ever wondered, why did it take this long? The answer is simple and sacred. Because what God saved for last was too important to rush, and what He trusted you with was too valuable to risk. Take a breath here. Let that truth settle into your spirit. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are right on time for the version of yourself that can finally receive what heaven preserved. Stay with me. There is more unfolding, and we are only moving deeper into it. Let's stay right here for a moment, because what we're entering now is subtle. This is where many people stop listening, not because it isn't true, but because it requires stillness to receive. Up to this point, you've learned to live with the waiting. You learned how to function without answers. You learned how to keep showing up even when nothing changed on the outside. But there comes a moment in every prepared life when waiting is no longer the lesson. And that moment is marked not by excitement, but by transfer, not of opportunity, not of position, but of trust. There is a sacred difference between being hopeful and being entrusted. Hope says, maybe one day. Trust says, you can handle this now. And heaven does not make that decision lightly. You were not shaped for delay alone. You were shaped for responsibility. That's why your path felt heavier than others. That's why you were often the one people leaned on while you had no one leaning on you. That's why you carried wisdom you never asked for. God was watching how you handled weight. And you handled it without becoming hard. That matters more than talent, more than ambition, more than visibility, because what God is preparing to release is not fragile, but it is precious. And precious things are not placed into careless hands. You may not have realized it at the time, but every season where you had to lead without recognition, every season where you had to choose integrity without reward, every season where you had to remain faithful without confirmation, those were evaluations. Not to see if you were perfect, but to see if you were safe. Safe with influence. Safe with provision. Safe with authority. And you passed. Not because you never struggled, but because you never surrendered your values. That is why this next season will feel different. You won't feel like you're chasing it. You won't feel like you're trying to convince anyone. You won't feel like you need to explain yourself, because trust has already been established. When God trusts someone, He does not announce it loudly. He simply begins to align things quietly. And you may have already noticed it. Conversations happening unexpectedly. People reaching out without you initiating. Doors opening that once felt sealed shut. Not because you changed your strategy, but because heaven changed the assignment. You are no longer being tested in the same way. That chapter is closing. And here is something you need to understand. Something that will guard your heart as things begin to shift. What is coming will not validate your past pain. It will redeem it. Redemption doesn't erase what you went through. It gives it meaning. One day, you will look back and realize that nothing in your life was random. The delays formed discernment. The disappointments taught restraint. The silence taught intimacy. You didn't just grow older, you grew deeper. And depth is what allows blessings to stay. That's why the blessing you're stepping into now is not designed to come and go. It's designed to settle. It will not feel like a temporary high. It will feel like alignment, like stepping into a rhythm that has always existed, but you weren't ready to walk in before. And that is why you don't need to rush. Rushing belongs to people who fear loss. But when God releases something He has secured, it doesn't need to be chased. It comes with gravity. It draws itself toward you. And you'll notice something surprising as it approaches. You're not anxious about it anymore. You're not obsessing. You're not trying to control the outcome. You're not bargaining with God. That tells you everything. Because when desire transforms into trust, heaven takes notice. You've reached the place where you don't need to own the blessing to feel complete. You simply need to receive it. And that is the posture God has been waiting for. This is why your preparation took time. If this had come earlier, it would have defined you. Now, it will serve you. If this had come earlier, it might have inflated your identity. Now, it will support the identity you already carry. If this had come earlier, it might have distracted you from God. Now, it will draw you closer. That is what it means when God saves the best for last. It's not about waiting longer than others. It's about arriving whole. And here is where your story quietly shifts from endurance to embodiment. You are no longer surviving your faith. You are living from it. You are no longer asking God to prove himself. You are watching him unfold himself, and you're doing it without panic. That's not coincidence. That's maturity meeting promise. And as things begin to move, and they will move, you will notice that nothing feels forced, nothing feels chaotic, nothing feels unstable. Because what was delayed was not delayed by confusion. It was delayed by intention. God was building a foundation strong enough to hold what he had in mind. And now, the wait is no longer a threat. It is a fit. You may not be able to explain this season to others. They may not understand why your joy feels quiet, why your confidence doesn't need to announce itself. But you don't need their understanding. You only need alignment, and you are stepping into it now. Stay with me, because the next part will help you recognize the signs, not with fear, not with pressure, but with clarity. We are still unfolding what God saved for last. Let's move gently now, because this part isn't about prediction. It's about recognition. When God begins to release what he saved for last, he doesn't announce it with noise. He lets peace speak first. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything going right, but the kind that arrives even when nothing has visibly changed yet. You may have noticed it already. A quiet settling, a loosening in your chest, a sense that you no longer need to push, explain, or convince. That is not resignation. That is alignment. There is a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up is heavy. Letting go is light. And lightness is often the first sign that heaven has shifted something. You are no longer fighting currents that resist you. You are no longer exhausted by decisions that used to drain you. You are no longer replaying old disappointments the way you once did. Not because they didn't matter, but because they no longer define you. This is what happens when preparation completes its work. You stop measuring your life by what hasn't happened yet. You start recognizing what has already changed within you. That inner shift is crucial because God never brings external alignment before internal readiness. If he did, the blessing would feel overwhelming instead of supportive. But now, notice how your prayers have changed. They're quieter, They're simpler. They're less about urgency and more about clarity. You're not asking God to fix everything. You're asking Him to guide you. That tells you something. It tells you trust has replaced fear, and fear is the last thing that needs to loosen its grip before alignment becomes visible. Another sign you may have noticed is this: your tolerance for what drains you has dropped. You no longer feel obligated to entertain conversations that pull you backward. You no longer feel guilty for stepping away from dynamics that cost you peace. You no longer chase validation from people who don't see you clearly. That isn't pride. That's discernment. And discernment is the language of mature faith. You're becoming selective, not out of judgment, but out of stewardship. Because when God is about to entrust you with something lasting, He teaches you how to protect your inner life. That protection isn't isolation, it's wisdom. And wisdom always shows up before fulfillment. You may also notice that timing feels different now. You're less impatient, less reactive, less pressured by other people's urgency. You've learned that rushing never produced peace, and peace is now your compass. That shift alone tells heaven you're ready, because the blessing God saved for last does not arrive through pressure. It arrives through alignment. And alignment does not shout. It settles. Another sign, one that's easy to overlook, is how your joy feels. It's not loud. It's not performative. It doesn't need witnesses. It's quiet, grounded, and steady. The kind of joy that comes from knowing who you are even before things change. That joy isn't excitement. It's assurance. And assurance is the soil where lasting blessings grow. You've also stopped comparing timelines. You may still notice others' journeys, but they no longer trigger the same ache. Instead of asking, why them and not me, you're asking, what is mine to steward? That is a profound shift. Comparison belongs to seasons of becoming. Clarity belongs to seasons of receiving. And clarity is beginning to mark your days. Now let me say something important, something that will help you stay anchored as things continue to unfold. When alignment begins, not everything immediately improves on the surface. Some things may actually fall away, not as loss, but as release. Certain attachments will loosen naturally. Certain expectations will dissolve quietly. Certain roles you once carried will no longer fit. This isn't regression. It's refinement. God removes what no longer matches where He's taking you. And because you've been prepared, this removal won't feel violent. It will feel necessary. You may even feel grateful for what once felt painful. That gratitude is not denial, it's perspective. You are seeing your life from a higher place now, from above. Patterns emerge. Connections make sense. Delays reveal their purpose. And with that perspective comes a deeper trust. You're no longer bracing for disappointment. You're no longer expecting things to fall apart. You're open, but not anxious. Hopeful, but not desperate. That balance is rare. And it is exactly where God places people He trusts. Here is something else you may notice as alignment deepens. Opportunities no longer require you to compromise yourself. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to perform. You don't have to become someone else to be welcomed. What is meant for you will recognize you as you are. That recognition may come through people. It may come through circumstances. It may come through an inner conviction that says, "This fits." And when it does, there will be no confusion. Confusion belongs to doors that aren't yours. Alignment feels calm, even when it stretches you. This is why the waiting mattered. If this had come earlier, you might have misread the signs. You might have confused intensity with calling. You might have mistaken pressure for purpose. But now, you know the difference. You've lived long enough to recognize when something costs you peace and when something supports it, and God honors that awareness. So, if you find yourself in a season where striving has ended, but fulfillment hasn't fully manifested yet, don't misunderstand it. You're not in limbo. You're in transition. A sacred pause where heaven and earth are aligning their timing. This is not the pause of uncertainty. This is the pause of precision, like a deep breath before something settles. Stay attentive, but not tense. Stay open, but not anxious. Stay grounded. Because what God saved for last does not arrive with chaos. It arrives with clarity, and clarity is already forming within you. Stay with me. There is more to recognize and more to receive as this alignment continues to unfold. Stay with this moment. Not everything meaningful announces itself right away. There is a kind of shift that happens long before circumstances change. A shift that takes place where no one applauds, where no one notices, where no one can measure it yet. This is that kind of season. What's unfolding now isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't need proof. It's internal alignment catching up with divine timing. And this is where many people misinterpret what God is doing. They think, if nothing around me looks different, nothing must be happening. But heaven doesn't work that way. God always moves in the unseen before He moves in the visible. Roots before fruit, foundation before structure, authorization before access. And authorization is happening now. You may sense it as a quiet confidence you didn't have before. Not arrogance, confidence without explanation. You don't feel the need to announce your faith. You don't feel the urge to defend your patience. You don't feel threatened by uncertainty the way you once did. That doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've stopped panicking. And panic is often the last thing to leave before alignment becomes visible. Something else may be happening too. Something subtle. Your reactions are changing. What used to provoke you doesn't have the same grip. What once drained you no longer has access. What once felt personal now feels informational. That shift is not emotional numbness. It's emotional authority. You are no longer being ruled by your circumstances. You are responding from a deeper place. And that deeper place is where God begins to trust you with more. Because blessings that last require a nervous system that can stay steady. You may not have thought of it this way, but heaven watches how you handle peace just as closely as it watches how you handle pressure. Some people crumble when things finally go right. They sabotage what they prayed for because they don't know how to live without tension. But you've learned how to be still. Not passive still. Still enough to listen. Still enough to discern. Still enough to receive without grasping. That stillness did not come easily. It was earned through years of waiting, disappointment, recalibration, and now it serves you. This is why what God saved for last will not overwhelm you. It will fit. And here's something important to understand as you move through this unseen shift. You don't have to feel ready in the way you imagined readiness would feel. Readiness isn't excitement anymore. It's groundedness. It's the ability to say, if this happens, I'll steward it well. And if it takes a little longer, I won't fall apart. That posture tells heaven everything, because God doesn't rush what is secure. He releases it when stability has formed, and stability is forming now. You may also notice a strange thing happening with your expectations. They're becoming simpler. You're not asking for excess. You're not asking for spectacle. You're asking for alignment, for provision that doesn't cost peace, for opportunities that don't require compromise, for relationships that don't demand self-erasure. Those are mature prayers, and mature prayers are answered differently. They're not answered with flash. They're answered with fit. The right thing, at the right time, in the right way. That's what you're being positioned for. And let me say this clearly, because this is where doubt sometimes tries to re-enter. The absence of visible change does not mean the absence of movement. Some of the most significant shifts in your life will happen quietly, without witnesses, without announcements, without immediate confirmation. And that's intentional, because God is not trying to impress anyone with your story. He's trying to establish you. There is a difference. Establishment takes time. It takes depth. It takes consistency. And consistency is what you've been building, even when it felt unnoticed. Think about how many times you showed up anyway. How many times you chose faith over frustration. How many times you didn't quit, even when quitting would have been understandable. That consistency is not forgotten. It is being honored. This unseen shift is also preparing you for something else, the ability to receive without losing gratitude. Gratitude that isn't based on relief, but on recognition. Recognition that says, "This didn't come because I forced it. It came because it was appointed." An appointment carries authority. When something is appointed, it doesn't need defending. It doesn't need explaining. It doesn't need proving. It stands on its own. That's the kind of blessing God saves for last. Not something you have to maintain through effort. Something that remains because it's supported by alignment. You may still have questions. You may still have moments of wondering. That's human. But notice how doubt doesn't stay as long as it used to. It comes, and then it leaves. It no longer takes residence, because you've learned how to return to center, and center is where heaven meets earth. Right now, you are closer than you think. Not because everything is in place, but because you are. Your heart is steady. Your discernment is sharp. Your expectations are clean. Those are not small things. Those are prerequisites. And as this unseen shift continues, you don't need to monitor it constantly. You don't need to analyze every sign. You don't need to rush interpretation. Just stay present. Stay honest. Stay grounded. Because what is unfolding now does not need your management. It needs your availability. Availability to recognize when the moment comes. Availability to say yes without fear. Availability to receive without shrinking. That is what God has been preparing. And that preparation is reaching its fullness. We're not at the end yet. There is still more to understand about how this unfolds and how you walk into it without losing yourself. Stay with me. The next part will help you recognize what to do as things begin to move without pressure, without striving, without fear. Now, we need to slow down even more here, because this part is not about what happens next. It's about how you walk when it does. Many people wait their whole lives for a door to open, but few are taught how to step through it without abandoning who they became in the waiting. And that matters, because what God saved for last is not meant to change your character. It's meant to rest on it. As things begin to move, and you may already sense that they are, you'll notice something unusual. You won't feel the urge to rush ahead. That's new. In earlier seasons, movement triggered urgency. Opportunity triggered fear of loss. Progress triggered pressure to perform. But this time, movement feels calm, not because you don't care, but because you're no longer afraid of it slipping away. That's one of the clearest signs that preparation has done its work. You trust the timing now, not because everything is clear, but because you are steady. And steadiness is what keeps blessings from turning into burdens. Let me say something gently, but truthfully. Some people lose themselves when prayers are answered. They abandon boundaries. They compromise values. They disconnect from God because the gift becomes louder than the giver. But that won't be your story, because the waiting trained you to listen. You learned how to pause, how to check your spirit, how to discern before deciding. Those skills were not accidental. They were rehearsals. And now, as alignment begins to express itself outwardly, you'll find that you don't need to abandon discernment to move forward. You don't need to say yes to everything. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to justify your pace. What is meant for you will not punish you for being careful. In fact, it will honor it. Another thing you may notice as you walk into this season is how little explanation you feel compelled to give. You're no longer trying to help others understand your journey. You're no longer seeking validation for your timing. You're no longer defending your choices, not because people suddenly agree, but because their agreement is no longer required. That's not indifference. That's clarity. Clarity about who you answer to. Clarity about what you're responsible for. Clarity about what matters. And clarity protects you when blessings arrive. Because without clarity, opportunity becomes noise. But with clarity, opportunity becomes alignment. You may also find that receiving now feels quieter than you imagined, less dramatic, less emotional, more grounded. That doesn't mean it's smaller. It means it's sustainable. Sustainable joy doesn't spike, it settles. Sustainable peace doesn't shout, it anchors. And anchoring is what allows things to remain. Remember this: God didn't preserve this for you just so you could touch it. He preserved it so you could live in it. Living in it requires presence, not urgency, not perfection. Presence, being where you are, listening before acting, staying connected to God even when the pressure to rely on yourself returns. And yes, it may return briefly. Old habits sometimes try to reassert themselves when new seasons begin. You might catch yourself wanting to control outcomes, wanting to rush clarity, wanting to secure what doesn't need securing. That's okay. Awareness is already a victory. You don't need to shame yourself for those impulses. You simply need to return to the posture that got you here. Trust. Trust that if God waited this long, He will not abandon the process halfway through. Trust that if He deemed you ready, He will also provide what's needed to steward what comes. Trust that you don't need to grasp what was designed to stay. This is also where humility continues to serve you. Not the humility of shrinking, but the humility of staying teachable, remaining open, remaining prayerful, remaining aware that alignment is not a destination, it's a rhythm. And rhythms require listening. You will know when to move. You will know when to wait. You will know when to speak, and when silence protects more than words ever could. The waiting taught you that silence is not empty. Now, it will teach you that silence can be powerful. As doors open, you may notice something else. The people who walk with you into this season will not be many. Not because you've become distant, but because alignment narrows circles naturally. That's not loss. That's focus. And focus is what keeps the blessing from being diluted. You're not meant to carry this season with everyone. You're meant to steward it with the right ones. God will make that clear quietly. No announcements, no confrontations, just clarity. And as you walk forward, there will be moments when you look back, not with longing, but with gratitude. Gratitude that you didn't receive this earlier. Gratitude that you were protected from yourself. Gratitude that the delay shaped you into someone who can now receive without fear. That gratitude will anchor you. It will remind you that nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the silence, not the waiting. Every part of it carried purpose. And now, that purpose is no longer forming. It's expressing. But we are not at the conclusion yet. There is still something essential to understand something about how this season doesn't just bless you, but flows through you. Stay with me. What comes next will help you recognize the deeper meaning of what God saved for last and why it extends beyond you alone. Now, let's slow everything down. Nothing needs to be proven here. Nothing needs to be rushed. This is the moment where the message settles not in your mind, but in your spirit. Take a gentle breath in through your nose and slowly out. You've carried a lot. You've waited longer than most. And you've stayed faithful in ways only God fully understands. This is where we seal what has been spoken, not with noise, not with urgency, but with peace. If you're able, let your shoulders relax. Unclench your jaw. Release the tension you didn't even realize you were holding. You are safe here. Guided prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you quietly now, not to ask for more words, but to receive what you have already prepared. You see the one listening. You know their journey better than they know it themselves. You have counted every tear, every delay, every moment of faith that went unseen. Father, we thank you that nothing was wasted. We thank you that the waiting was not punishment, but preparation. We thank you that what you saved for last was protected by your wisdom and your love. Right now, we ask you to seal this message deep within their spirit. Where there has been weariness, breathe rest. Where there has been doubt, breathe assurance. Where there has been fear of loss, breathe trust. Let your peace, your steady, anchoring peace settle over their heart now. Not a fleeting peace, but the kind that remains, Father, Quiet every voice that says they are behind. Silence every lie that says they missed their moment. Dissolve every fear that tries to resurrect old timelines. Replace it with truth. Truth that says they are right on time. Truth that says they are trusted. Truth that says what you preserve, you also secure. We acknowledge that what is coming does not need striving. It does not need manipulation. It does not need fear. It needs alignment. And we thank you that alignment has already begun. Now, Lord, we place everything into your hands. The unanswered questions, the unfolding doors, the next steps that are not yet clear. We choose trust over control. We choose peace over pressure. We choose faith over fear. Cover this listener with your presence tonight. Let your spirit stand guard over their thoughts as they rest. Let clarity continue to form gently, without strain. And let what you saved for last arrive in the way you designed at the right time, in the right measure. With the right support, we receive this now in humility and gratitude. Amen. Declarations. Speak these quietly, or let them rest in your heart. I am not late. I am aligned. I was not forgotten. I was prepared. What God saved for last was saved with intention. I do not need to rush what God has secured. Peace goes before me. Wisdom walks with me. Grace follows me. I receive without fear. I steward without striving. I trust without hesitation. What is meant for me will recognize me. Nothing that belongs to me will miss me. I am ready not because I am perfect, but because I am grounded. I am at rest in God's timing. Amen. Now, there is nothing else you need to do. You don't need to replay every word. You don't need to analyze the timing. You don't need to search for signs. Let this rest in you the way a seed rests in soil, quietly, patiently, securely. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. If your heart feels lighter, let it stay that way. God does not rush what He loves, and He is not rushing you. Tonight, choose rest, choose trust, choose peace. What was saved for last is not in danger. It is not slipping away. It is moving at the pace of wisdom, and you are not walking alone. May you sleep covered. May you wake strengthened. May your spirit remain steady. And may the peace of God, the kind that needs no explanation, guard your heart and mind. Rest here. You are exactly where you are meant to be.